Erwin Rommel did not begin his military career as a rebel, a dissenter, or a man thinking about resisting the regime he served. He began as a soldier. A brilliant one. The kind of commander who could take small units and achieve results that looked impossible on paper. Long before he became known as the Desert Fox, Rommel earned attention for being bold, fast-thinking, and completely dedicated to his men. He was the type of officer who led from the front, not from a desk. That reputation for courage made him stand out, and in a country rebuilding its military identity, men like that were noticed very quickly. When Hitler rose to power, Rommel was exactly the kind of officer the new regime wanted: loyal, energetic, confident, and not connected to the old aristocratic military elites who disliked Hitler. Rommel didn't grow up in the traditional Prussian officer caste. He wasn't from a family of generals. He built his career on ability rather than heritage, and Hitler admired that Hitler loved men who represented his idea of raw talent triumphing over old structures, and Rommel fit perfectly into that vision. The two developed a working relationship that was unusually close for a head of state and a mid-level military officer. Hitler admired Rommel's battlefield reports. Rommel admired Hitler's early political and military successes. When Hitler wanted to showcase the new German army, Rommel was trusted with high-profile roles, including commanding Hitler's own security battalion during major state events. This relationship wasn't just professional. Hitler genuinely respected Rommel, and Rommel genuinely believed Hitler could restore Germany's place in the world. For a time, both men saw in each other what they wanted to see: a visionary leader and a loyal, brilliant commander. As the Second World War began, Rommel's rise became meteoric. His performance in France in 1940 was so impressive that even rival officers had to admit he possessed unusual instincts. He didn't just follow orders, he anticipated opportunities, often breaking through enemy lines faster than expected. Hitler saw these reports and felt vindicated. He believed Germany had found a military genius perfectly matched to the new era. So when Hitler needed someone to command the Afrika Korps in 1941, he chose Rommel. North Africa is where Rommel's legend became global. He moved faster than anyone expected. He struck with daring precision. His men trusted him because he shared their hardships. His opponents respected him because he won even when he was outnumbered. British commanders frequently complained that fighting Rommel felt like fighting someone who could see the entire board at once. He defied supply problems, harsh deserts, and constant Allied pressure. And back in Germany, Hitler celebrated his victories as proof that Germany could overcome any challenge through sheer willpower and skill. But while Hitler loved Rommel's successes, he didn't understand Rommel's warnings. Rommel repeatedly told the High Command that North Africa could not be won unless supplies flowed consistently. He needed fuel, armor, and reinforcements to hold his gains. The Allies had overwhelming naval and industrial strength. Germany didn't. Hitler dismissed these concerns as negativity. He believed Rommel could perform miracles indefinitely, even as the situation on the ground worsened. This was the beginning of the fracture between the two men. Rommel was loyal, but he was not blind. He saw logistics failing. He saw Allied production increasing. He saw the desert turning from a battleground he could dominate into a theater Germany could no longer sustain. For the first time, Rommel realized that Hitler's vision of the war did not match the reality he faced daily. When the Afrika Korps eventually had to retreat, Hitler insisted on orders forbidding any withdrawal. Rommel faced a choice: obey and lose his entire force, or defy the order to preserve his men. He chose to save them. It was one of the first quiet acts of resistance, even though he did not view it as betrayal at that moment. To him, it was common sense. To Hitler, it was a sign that Rommel was losing his fighting spirit. By the time Rommel returned to Europe, the situation across the war was deteriorating. The Eastern Front was draining German resources. The Allied air campaign was intensifying, and intelligence reports showed that the Western Allies were preparing a major landing somewhere along the French coast. Hitler believed his defensive system, the Atlantic Wall, would stop any invasion, Rommel did not. He had walked the beaches. He had studied the fortifications. He had seen the coastline from end to end. He believed the defenses were not strong enough, and he warned repeatedly that if the Allies landed successfully, Germany would not be able to push them back. This disagreement widened the cracks in his relationship with Hitler even further. Hitler refused to let Rommel reposition forces the way he requested. He refused to reinforce threatened sectors. He refused to give Rommel the freedom he needed. Rommel began to see that the problem wasn't just a few bad decisions. The problem was systemic. Hitler believed the war could be willed into success. Rommel believed the war required realistic planning, and no amount of belief could replace fuel, ammunition, manpower, and time. As the pressure mounted, Rommel's doubts grew. He began meeting with other high-ranking officers who also believed the war could not be won under Hitler's leadership. Some of them were already involved in secret plans to remove Hitler from power. At first, Rommel wanted nothing to do with this. He despised political intrigue. He was a soldier, not a conspirator. But as he saw more of the truth behind the scenes, his attitude changed. Reports showed that Germany's resources were collapsing. Civilians were suffering. Cities were being destroyed. And Hitler refused to accept even the most basic facts. Rommel became convinced that continuing the war would lead to total national ruin. At this point, he began discussing, quietly and privately, the possibility of negotiating with the Western Allies. His goal was not surrender. He believed Germany could still make a deal if Hitler were removed from the leadership. Rommel hoped for a negotiated settlement that would stop the destruction before Germany ceased to exist altogether. These discussions were cautious but genuine. He spoke with trusted officers. He signaled his willingness to explore peace terms. Some intermediaries in neutral countries sent subtle messages to Allied officials indicating that not all German commanders supported Hitler's direction. Anymore, Rommel believed that if Germany could establish a new government, one not tied to Hitler's ideology, the Western Allies might agree to a ceasefire, allowing Germany to shift its remaining strength to defend itself from the Soviet advance in the East. This was the moment Rommel crossed the invisible line between loyalty and betrayal. At least in Hitler's eyes. Rommel wasn't plotting to harm Hitler physically, but he was working against Hitler's policy, Hitler's strategy, and Hitler's vision. Rommel's priority was Germany's survival, not Hitler's authority, and that alone made him dangerous. As D-Day approached, Rommel fought tirelessly to prepare the defenses. But he privately believed the invasion, if successful, would confirm everything he feared, that Germany could not win a two-front war and needed political change immediately. When the Allies landed in Normandy, Rommel rushed to the front, trying to stabilize the situation. He could see that Germany lacked the mobility, fuel, and air power to launch a decisive counterattack. He urged Hitler to seek an end to the war before total collapse. Hitler refused. Rommel's voice became more direct. He told colleagues that Hitler was no longer capable of leading Germany. He said the war needed to stop. He argued that prolonging it would only bring greater tragedy. These statements, spoken inside a dictatorship built on absolute loyalty, were dangerous. People close to Hitler began hearing whispers that Rommel was no longer fully supportive of the regime. Around the same time, the July 20th group was secretly planning to remove Hitler and replace the government. Rommel was not part of the direct action. He did not support violent solutions, but he did support the idea of removing Hitler from leadership and opening negotiations. That alone placed him in the broader circle of dissent. When the July operation failed, Hitler demanded a full investigation into anyone who might have supported the thinking behind the plot. Rommel's name surfaced quickly. Officers revealed he had spoken openly about ending the war and replacing Hitler. They testified he had expressed support for political change. Rommel's conversations about negotiating with the Allies became incriminating evidence. Hitler now believed Rommel had betrayed him, not because Rommel attempted action himself, but because Rommel had lost faith. In a regime built on fear and loyalty, doubting the leader was enough to make someone a threat, Rommel was confronted by senior officials and given an ultimatum meant to remove him quietly. The regime wanted to avoid a public scandal. Rommel was told he could accept a private end or face a public trial that would extend punishment to his family. Rommel understood the message. He chose to protect his family. His life ended shortly after, and Hitler announced to the public that Rommel had passed away from natural causes. In reality, he had been forced out because Hitler no longer trusted him. The story of Rommel's betrayal is not a simple tale of a man who changed sides. It is a story of a commander who began with loyalty, brilliance, and belief in his leader, only to realize that the leadership he once admired was steering the nation toward destruction. His betrayal was not driven by ambition or ideology. It was driven by the belief that Germany's survival required a different path. He tried to reason, he tried to warn, and eventually he quietly sought a way to end the war without further devastation. In the eyes of history, Rommel's betrayal was not treason. It was the moment he stopped serving a regime and started trying to save a nation.